masterminded this success.
Middlesbrough have made it. They're in the Carling Cup final.
It's a footballing fairy story.
It's Chelsea's night. It's Wayne Bridge.
It is over.
Goes alone. Caught by Paul Cahill. He's on the spot.
Comme dans la première mi-temps, même si le scénario est différent, la Tunisie qui marque à nouveau, qui reprend.
2004 was an interesting year in football. Two of Europe's top 5 leagues were turned upside down. Second division teams reached the domestic cup final in England, France and Germany. The Champions League had one of its weirdest group of semi-final teams ever. 2 countries won its first ever trophy, and one of the best summer tournaments in football ended with possibly the greatest underdog story of all time. 2004 was truly the year of the underdog. It's the summer of 2003 and Bayern Munich are celebrating their 18th league title, finishing 16 points ahead of second place Stuttgart and wrapping up a 4th Bundesliga win in 5 years. The German top flight is starting to get all too predictable. But one team is lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. Werder Bremen were a perpetual mid-table side, last finishing in the top 4 way back in 1995. They had just finished 6th at the end of the 2002-2003 season, suffering 14 defeats. But in 2003, they turned it all around. Despite having virtually the same squad as last season, Bremen won 6 of their first 9 games, including a 4-1 victory against Schalke and Cologne. Then, after losing at home to Stuttgart on matchday 9, Bremen went undefeated for the next 22 games. And going into matchday 32, away at Bayern Munich nonetheless, with a chance to win the title, they soundly beat the defending champions to secure their first league title in 11 years. In Spain, newly promoted Real Zaragoza entered the season with hopes of just staying in La Liga. With a relatively young side, Zaragoza struggled to gain any form in the league and were flirting with relegation. But despite their league form, it was in the cup, the Copa del Rey, where Real Zaragoza shined. After beating lower league sides Mirandas and Salamanca in the first 2 rounds, Zaragoza beat high-flying Real Betis 4-2 to set up a tie against the mighty Barcelona. 22-year-old David Villa's penalty was the only goal in a 1-0 victory at the Nou Camp, whilst an 86-minute Jordi goal sent Zaragoza through to the semi-finals, where they met and beat Deportivo Alavés for a second Copa del Rey final in 4 years against the Galacticos of Real Madrid. In a matchup between David and Goliath, Zaragoza led 2-1 at half-time, then kept Madrid level for 14 minutes heading into extra time, the period in which Luciano Galletti scored in the 110th minute to win the Copa del Rey for Zaragoza. The first round proper of the English Domestic Cup kicked off as usual in November of 2003. But when the cup reached the 3rd round stage in January, it was time to introduce the 44 teams from the top 2 divisions. The likes of Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea began their campaign in the FA Cup. But on the 2nd of January 2004, in Bermondsey, South London, Millwall defeated Walsall by the score of 2-1 to progress into the 4th round. Millwall then went on to defeat non-league side Telford United and First Division Burnley at home. Suddenly, Millwall were in the quarter-finals for the first time since 1985. While all of this was happening, Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs and previous season's runners-up Southampton had already exited the competition. There were 4 Premier League sides left in the quarter-finals, and Millwall had drawn second division side Tranmere Rovers. Despite a 0-0 draw at the Den, the Lions travelled to Merseyside and defeated Tranmere 2-1 to go into the semi-finals for the first time since 1937. Arsenal versus Manchester United, Millwall versus Sunderland. Throughout the entire run, Millwall had managed to avoid playing a single Premier League team. They defeated Sunderland at Old Trafford to reach the final for the first time ever. Unfortunately, the fairy tale season ended in a 3-0 defeat to Manchester United in Cardiff, but a consolation prize was there for Millwall. They played in Europe for the first time ever the following season. Over in France, a similar story was occurring. Unlike the FA Cup, it's common for lower league sides to reach the final. 2004 was the 4th time in 6 years it had happened. La Berrichon de Châteauroux, who'd only had 1 season in the French football's top flight, made it to the final in the Stade de France, having only faced 1 top flight team in their entire run, which was the Champions League finalists of Monaco. Again, like Millwall, they fell short in the final, losing 1-0 to French giants PSG. But in the other domestic cup, FC Sochaux Montbéliard went one better in the Coupe de la Ligue. Sochaux hadn't won a major trophy in almost 70 years entering 2004, having lost in the previous year's final 4-1 to Monaco. Whilst competing for European spots in the league, Sochaux knocked out fellow Ligue 1 sides Marseille, Lens and Saint-Étienne before defeating Nantes on penalties in the final for their first trophy in 67 years.
It's advantage Middlesbrough going into the second leg of the Carling Cup semi-final. Juninho has given them a lead from the first leg at Highbury.
Arsenal have just been handed their first domestic defeats of the season at the hands of Middlesbrough. Mid-table Middlesbrough went into invincible chasing Arsenal's home, defeated them 1-0 at Highbury and then 2-1 at the Riverside to book themselves a place in the 2004 League Cup final for the first time since 1998. This wasn't just any old plucky side. Steve McLaren's side, which featured Juninho, Gaizka Mendieta, Zenden, Gareth Southgate and Massimo Macaroni, had to battle through extra time against First Division Brighton, beat Wigan away, 2 penalty shootouts against Everton and at Tottenham, before returning to North London and slaying the giants of Arsenal to reach the League Cup final at Wembley.
It will be Okocha.
Another ragtag bunch of misfits in Bolton Wanderers were the surprise opponents in Cardiff after teaching Aston Villa a footballing lesson at the Reebok in a 5-2 win. Having just survived relegation by the skin of their teeth the previous season, Bolton signed experienced players in Ivan Campo, Yuri Zhorkaev and JJ Okocha. Bolton defeated lower league sides Walsall and Gillingham before going to Anfield and handing Liverpool a 3-2 defeat, beat Southampton in the 115th minute, then laid Villa to rest in the semi-finals. The stage was set for either Bolton to win their first major trophy in nearly 50 years or for Middlesbrough to win a first ever major trophy. The final was decided in the first 20 minutes as Borough raced to a 2-goal lead inside 10 minutes before Bolton grabbed one back through Kevin Davis. Borough held on for a first ever trophy and a place in Europe. Entering the 24th edition of the Africa Cup of Nations, the tournament was held in the north of Africa, in Tunisia, for the 3rd time in the competition's history. The nation of Tunisia welcomed back-to-back African champions Cameroon, the Super Eagles of Nigeria, 3 times champions Egypt, and Senegal, who impressed at the 2002 World Cup. The first time Tunisia hosted the competition in 1965, they finished runners-up to Ghana. Then, in the next 30 years, they only qualified from the group stages once. In 2002, Tunisia finished with just 2 points and no goals scored. It's safe to say that the Eagles were far from favourites. Tunisia kicked off the tournament with a 2-1 win over Rwanda, then followed that up with a 3-0 win over DR Congo and a 1-1 draw with Guinea to progress to the knockout stages top of their group. Tunisia beat a Senegal side who still had the likes of El Hadj Diouf and Papa Bouba Diop, took a strong Nigeria team to penalties and won, before defeating fellow North Africans Morocco 2-1 to win their first ever international trophy. In Europe's premier competition, there's no real place for Cinderella stories or for David to defeat multiple Goliaths on their way to a trophy. These underdogs are usually swept under the rug and left to dream of things to come. But in 2004, 6 clubs, mainly 4, collectively turned the European landscape on its head. This was the debut Champions League season for both Celta Vigo and Stuttgart, Vigo won games against both Ajax at home and Milan at the San Siro, with 2 draws against Bruges, which saw the Galatian side progress 1 point behind defending champions Milan. Stuttgart, on the other hand, picked up 4 wins out of 6 in their group, 1 against Rangers, a double against Panathinaikos and a 2-1 home win against Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United. Celta Vigo's run ended against Arsenal in the last 16, while Stuttgart fell at the same stage 1-0 to Chelsea. Speaking of Chelsea, this was the London club's second ever campaign in the Champions League. Their last one in 2000 saw them reach the quarter-finals before losing to Barcelona. Despite the new riches brought to Chelsea by Abramovich, Chelsea were still underdogs in the European landscape. After a comfortable group stage and squeezing past Stuttgart, Chelsea beat London rivals and invincibles Arsenal on their way to the first ever semi-final. Over in the northwest corner of Spain, Deportivo La Coruña were on the back end of the most successful period in the club's history. Deportivo won all their home games in the group against AEK Athens, PSV and Monaco, whilst their away games left much to be desired, which included a back-breaking 8-3 loss in the French Riviera. In the last 16, they faced last year's runners-up Juventus and kept clean sheets in both games, setting up a quarter-final matchup against the defending champs. After a first-leg 4-1 defeat in the San Siro, Coruña fans were staring at yet another quarter-final exit, before Deportivo produced one of the Champions League's greatest ever comebacks with a 4-0 home drubbing of one of the best football teams ever assembled. Our third team in the semi-final comes in the form as AS Monaco, a team who'd finished 15th in Ligue 1 in 2002, who quietly went about their business in Europe, well apart from delivering an 8-3 hammering of Deportivo. Managed by Didier Deschamps, which included the likes of Patrice Evra, Emmanuel Adebayor and Fernando Morientes, Monaco finished top of Group C and went on to face Lokomotiv Moscow, who they lost to 2-1 in freezing temperatures. Monaco returned home to defeat the Russians 1-0 to send them through on away goals to face Real Madrid. There, they went on to take the lead in the Bernabeu, before surrendering 4 goals in 30 minutes to the Galacticos. But crucially, Fernando Morientes grabbed what seemed to be just a consolation goal in the 83rd minute. This proved vital, as once again Monaco had to come back from a deficit in the second leg and beat the Spanish Giants 3-1 on the night and level the tie 5-5 on aggregate. But those 2 goals in Spain were enough to once again send Monaco through on away goals. After finishing second in their group behind Real Madrid, Jose Mourinho's Porto side faced off against English champions Manchester United in the last 16. 2 goals from South African international Benny McCarthy put the Portuguese side into the driving seat going into Manchester. After Scholes gave United a 1-0 lead, the game was headed into extra time, until Costinha turned home this rebound to spot these wild scenes by the players and a 100-meter sprint by Mourinho. Porto then comfortably knocked out French champions Lyon to reach the semi-finals. 4 teams, 2 who've never been here before, one for only the second time in their history and the other for the first time since 1987. The first match took place in the Principality of Monaco, where a close game between Monaco and Chelsea was settled by Morientes and Nonda goals to give Monaco a 3-1 lead going into the second leg. The very next day, Porto and Deportivo La Coruña played out a goalless draw in Portugal, but 2 weeks later, a rash tackle on Deco gave Porto a penalty, which Derlei took perfectly even though the keeper guessed the direction correctly. That would be the only goal of the game and Porto were in the final. In West London, Chelsea were looking to overturn a 2-goal deficit against Monaco. They got off to a great start after Jesper Gonchar gave them the lead with this stunning curling effort. Despite Morientes hitting the post 4 minutes later, Chelsea doubled their lead thanks to a Frank Lampard finish. In stoppage time, Hugo Ibarra got the final touch to Morientes' header to give Monaco a lifeline in this game and put them back in front in the tie. Chelsea's dreams were finally crushed when Morientes, the star of the tie, was played through on goal and slotted home to send Monaco to their first Champions League final in Germany. The game was frantic. Both teams played with lots of energy and last-ditch challenges were flying everywhere. Monaco rarely threatened the Porto defence and ultimately paid the price, as Carlos Alberto, Deco and Alenchiev scored to give the Portuguese side their second European Cup and first since 1987, and to this day, the last team from outside the big 5 European leagues to win the trophy. Qualifying for the 2004 Euros has come around and Greece has already lost their opening 2 games. Even the most optimistic Greek fans may have already been thinking of how the team's going to prepare for the 2006 World Cup qualifying campaign. But to everyone's shock, Greece won their remaining 6 games, including a 1-0 win in Spain to top their group and qualify for the European Championships for the first time in 24 years. Heading into only their second ever tournament, Greece were second lowest favourites to win the Euros, only above Latvia, understandably. As 150-1 odds favourites, the Greeks were placed in a group of death with host Portugal, previous rival Spain and Russia. Greece then opened the tournament by shocking the hosts with a 2-1 win thanks to goals from Karagounis and Bassinas. 4 days later and Greece held Spain to a 1-1 draw, and despite losing to Russia in the final game, that one goal was enough to pip Spain to second spot in the group and advance to the quarterfinals. There, they met the defending champions and undefeated French team. The game was scoreless until the 65th minute when Zagorakis was given the freedom of Lisbon to deliver a pinpoint cross to the unmarked Charisteas, who headed home to give Greece the lead and a 1-0 victory to knock out the French. Greece now became the first team ever to beat the hosts and defending champions in a single tournament. In the semi-finals, they met the Czech Republic's golden generation. Nedved, Rosicky, Barros and Cech to name a few, the Czechs had won every single game up until this point, and were now favourites to win it all. The Czech dominated the game and missed several chances in the 90 minutes, which meant extra time was forced. And when Greece won a corner in the first half added time, Delas met the corner with a fierce header to send their fans into raptures and put Greece into the first ever final. The last game of the tournament was a rematch of the first, as Greece played host Portugal in the final of the Euro 2004 in front of 62,000 supporters. Greece immediately went into a defensive style, leaving Portugal to control most of the game. The combination of heaps of pressure on the Portuguese players and the Greeks' reluctance to push many players forward led to a very dull first half. But in the second half, a breakthrough came for the Greek side. With their first corner of the match, Bassinas sent the ball into the box, which was met by a Charisteas header which powered past the Portugal keeper, a carbon copy of his goal against France. And remember Charisteas? He was also part of that Werder Bremen squad that I mentioned earlier. Greece held on for the rest of the game to secure their first ever tournament victory and complete one of the biggest shocks in football history.